Thank you all for joining. This session, I would like to thank Anna, the founder of Women Tech, and as well as the organizers to help us come and present on various topics. And my topic today is the track that I am going on with this society, sustainability, and impact. We all just had the World Environment Day. As it's not like just one day we celebrate, right? We have to celebrate every day, so we take care of this only one earth that we have, right? So since my area has been in AI for the last few years, I'm very passionate on the sustainability side, and I thought, okay, how we can apply some of the principles in AI for social good. And that's what my topic is about today. I hope everyone is able to hear, see the screen. If you have any questions, I will take it at the end, but just wanted to double check before I get on to my presentation. Awesome. Okay, great. So I hope everyone is doing great this morning, this evening, from wherever you're logging in. So let's get started. So what do you see here when you see this image? What comes to your mind? Can you type it on the chat, please? Take a look at the image, and then whatever comes in your mind, please add it on the chat. I want to make it a little interactive. Awesome. Okay. Going to give it a little bit time to see everyone is typing it. Whether it's morning or evening, we all love bananas, right? So I hope I'm not making anyone hungry. Awesome. So let me pause here because of the to be cognizant of time. So let's go to the next slide. So what come to our minds when seeing this image below is, like we talked about, we said someone mentioned about bananas with stickers on them, bananas on the shelf, bananas, fresh and ripe bananas, all these things, right? And we specifically talked about stickers, I saw on the chat. So all these things, and I'm not sure whether someone noticed it's the sticker is Dole labeled bananas. That's fine. All these things come to our mind. What doesn't come to our mind is what we see and don't say it, because we know bananas are yellow in color, right? So we don't say as yellow bananas, right? So yellow is something like prototypical for bananas, so we do not say that. So why I'm bringing this, I will talk about this in a little bit. So let's go to the next one. I'll quickly check on the chat. Okay, great, Simone. So let's go to the next one. So what do we assume here? So a man and his son are in a road accident and was rushed to the hospital. So the doctor says, I can't operate the boy because that is, it says he's my son. How could this be? So let's take a pause and go to the next slide. So what do we assume here? If you go to the previous slide, whether we have women folks in the room or men or any other gender, just if what we see is like we assume that the doctor could be a male, like a father operating on the son. We do not, because what happens is like the majority of the test subjects, what we overlook today is like the doctor overlook as the doctor is a she. If even a couple of years ago, what we noticed when we try to use a search engine, we used to see like if we put nurses, it would pop up all women. If we put doctors, it would pop up all male images, right? So whether this is something overlooked, right? So let's keep that thought, and I'm jumping onto the slide. Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So the human biases is everywhere. We have inherent. So if I say like I like certain color, then that means I have some inherent bias, right? So it's like human data, what we are going to talk about, because without data, AI doesn't exist, right? So it's all about data. It's driven. So human data perpetuates the human biases. So in the machine learning, as we learn from the human data, the result is it's a bias network effect, right? And that's what I wanted to emphasize here, because we are going to talk about how we are applying certain principles in AI for the social good. So how are these biases can be tried to be addressed? So as I mentioned in the earlier slide, if you take a pause, whether we talked about bananas, because we assume, because we grew up, the only thing we see is when it is raw, it's green in color. When it ripes, it's yellow. And then right from right from the beginning, it was instilled, like saying like, okay, doctors probably, we have been thinking through, as I mentioned, whether we are women, male, men, whoever the folks are, we assume that these are all the assumption we have, that oh, it could be that could be a male doctor, right? So there happens a gender bias. So all these biases, how we can address it, it is all in the data. So the data absolutely matters, right? We need to understand the data because we want to see whether it is skewed and the correlation. And we also make sure that we are not segregating or abandoning a single training set. And we need to make sure that we have reviewed in all angles, and whether we have only insufficient data or we have enough data. And we need to decide on how we need to change our design right from the project inception, not like after we deploy it in the production and then say, oh, these are the we tested for good and worst scenarios, but the worst scenarios, we are coming up with a lot of worst scenarios, so which we did not test it well. And what happens? So that happens because we did not look into the data right from the beginning. So it's up to us to influence how the AI evolves. See, we make the machine intelligent, right? Because we have that the human intelligence is at the best. So we give the intelligence to the machine, and what we cannot computationally achieve in a certain amount of time, machine learning is able, like machines are able to achieve, right? And when we think of machine learning algorithm, it's nothing but it's math, right? So here are some things that I mentioned here that we could do. And as you see, you can use certain deep learning techniques for certain inclusions and all those things, so that we don't ignore any subgroups, any marginalized groups, so that we take into account all the data. And that's what I wanted to talk about here. And as we go further, so how we can make this AI, because when we have our own biases, it's something like, food waste. We cannot say, oh, I have eliminated food waste. That's not going to happen. But we can minimize the food waste to a maximum extent. Likewise, we can minimize the bias. We cannot say I've eliminated the bias, only because we all have, as humans, we all have that um, some amount of bias in ourselves, right? So being like how we say, like, if I'm hiring somebody that I know from my family member, obviously will have some bias. So that's why, to have a blind review, I do not want to interview that person. Somebody else has to interview the person, right? So those were the biases that I'm emphasizing here. So just making sure the time. Okay. So minimizing bias, this image, I really liked it. So because it talks about, it is very critical. That's why, I do not like to emphasize saying like, okay, the best choice of word to use is minimize or reduce, rather saying we are eliminating bias. And because that is not going to happen. So it's very critical how we minimize the bias. So if AI is to reach its fullest potential, and how that is possible, we have to make sure we train the data, and these are the steps we take, and how we establish the best practices in order to test it, which is very important. And we need to have those engage fact-based conversations. Today we have, like in many organizations, you might notice AI governance officers employed, where they are there right from when they start looking at the data, doing the data cleaning and data preparation, up until the deployment on and thereafter. So this is not like just they come in at the very end and see, oh, okay, you have tested for worst scenarios and good scenarios. Okay, all the stress testing has been done. Let's move forward. That is not how it works, right? So we need to make sure we are at the every step of the way, and so that we can minimize the bias as much as possible. And that's what this talks about, this slide, so that how AI can help make that fair decisions. So coming to here, this is a recent paper that I wrote, which is how to apply that FEAT approach to develop responsible AI. So going back here, this is the paper. Let me go here. I'm adding this paper. So I'm referencing the image. What I'm talking about is from my paper. So the FEAT principles, what I'm talking about is the fairness, ethics, accountability, and transparency. How we can apply this, since our topic is about AI for social good, how we can apply this in the social realm. That's what I'm trying to discuss about in today's topic. Okay, so because when it comes to fairness, what are all the things that, because these four principles, there are several principles out there. Many different research studies have studied about it, shared about it, but these four principles, why they are very critical out of all, is because these four comprises, which is, if you have these four, it's kind of locked up, that you are going to create a model that is like, definitely it will work for best for after extensive testing for both good and bad scenarios. And this is like this encompasses the AA governance framework, so which expands on this FEAT approach and talks about what all that we cover in fairness, what all that we talk about in ethics, accountability, and then in transparency. And still, this is also referenced in my paper, which you can take a look at it later on. So how are we going to help achieve? We all know that there are 17 goals, right, in sustainability, sustainable development goals set by UN. And when we see helping achieve humans, the SDGs with AI, so this is like we see um, from no poverty, zero hunger, all these things, in everywhere AI can be applied, right? Let's take a couple of moments. If you all could be able to write on the chat, type it on the chat, like one thing that AI could solve for social good. Can you think of one thing that AI could solve for social good? It could be anything. Hunger, okay. Awareness, very beautifully written, Simone. Visual impact, that's a great one. Moving forward because of time constraints, so please keep typing. So what I'm going to talk about here and walk through a sample code is uh, beautifully, like this paper was written by Dr. Boundy, and she mentions about how she is able to spot poachers in action in near real time using drones. So where A is extensively helped. So because you do not have to go, if it's a very big national park, you do not have to go and search through the park rangers or the policing, when we are policing to see where the poachers are, because we need to safeguard the elephants. So they employ drones, and if it's a larger park, how do you know where the elephants are, right? So we need to find out, the drones help us to go to a certain areas to look at it. How we know which area that it needs to look at it? That is where machine learning comes in order to train, and it keeps train on various areas and find out where the images are through the thermal infrared images, so that it makes sure, oh, these are the areas that we see elephants, some. So, and then it detects that and informs if there are poachers, so that it is able to inform to the police and does the work beautifully. So we are going to see how an AI powered image classification and object detection happens, and that helps us to mitigate, combat, or tackle that illegal wildlife trading for ivory and for whatnot, right? So let's take a pause here, and I'm going to go here for a minute. So this is shared by Dr. Bondi, and what you see here is the green squares represents there are zero elephants, but the ones that you see in different colors, it shows that there are elephants. So what happens is here, when this is written in Python. So what we are doing here is we are generating a synthetic data for based on whichever the park. This will work for any park that you take, so that it talks about the number of elephants in each location. So see, if this is a larger park, think about it, several acres. If you put the drone somewhere here, it's going to, we are wasting time, right? Time is the essence here. You do not want elephants to be in front of the poachers. So you want to make sure where you fly the drone, so it is able to detect and send the images right away, so that the policing or the park rangers are able to identify it. So what are the two critical things when we run the machine learning we need to do? This is run on a linear regression model. What we are doing here is we are trying to see like where the images are, so it will share both the elephants and as well as the poachers, so that it will be able to detect. So two things that we in this code you see is, it also detects where will the elephants be, where it is, it's eating grass or something. So it looks for where there is more forestry kind of bushes, and also it looks for that elevation where it's a mountaineering part, and also where there is water, right? Looking at those two areas, we try to run the data, collect data, so that we are able to see where we can fly the drone. And when we see it, we could be wherever there are dark blue areas, that means there is water. And so that way we see that the elephant population where it is in majority, and we can be able to fit a machine learning model where we will know these are the areas that there are known elephant data, and find out. So I can share this later on. You can find this for this demo, where you can find to run this code. And when you run this code, you can see how we can apply this. So how this relates to, so we can make all these guesses and find out all these these are the areas where the elephants are, and we can be able to safeguard the elephants. And that's what this main thing about, and how AI helps through the drones, in order to, because we are using the machine learning model here, so it trains and able to give you the right data, so that we are able to go and send the send the people to get the poachers away, and so that elephants can be safeguarded. So what we see here is, if you need, this code was shared by Dr. Bondi from Harvard. So I just wanted to show this. And how am I applying this FEAT in here? So that's where I'm going back here. Give me a second. Okay. So how am I applying FEAT, the principles? How we can make this ethical AI? There are certain things that we should look into, where we need to make sure that when we collect that data, we are not having some insufficient data and sending drones somewhere, and before the drones capture certain images, the poachers have already hit the elephant. We don't want that to happen. So we want to make sure that sufficient data is collected, and we have to train the model over and over again, and make sure that we have enough data, right? But we also need make sure that we are not falsifying any data, right? That is important. And then how we safeguard, so that we don't manipulate anything in the ML model, right? That is important. And this is taken from a paper. It's beautifully written, how to design AI for social good. And this is applicable not only for the biodiversity conservation, but also for many other, which you all added it on the chat, as hunger, and things that are under the carpet, someone has mentioned, like, or for visually impaired, many other applications. These 7 factors would come in handy, and where we need to protect the data. What if we put the data public, and we say, oh, these where the elephants are, and where poachers could go there and hunt the elephants? So we need to make sure we provide the privacy of the data as well. So, and we should also have the situational fairness, which is like justifying where we can remove certain relevant data sets that we don't, that corresponding for certain best practices, and making sure we are not excluding anything. Okay, and that is very important. And then how we can also specify the human friendly semanticization. So these are all the 7 factors that we should look into when we apply for this bioconservation project, what I was giving as an example here. So I'm not sure how much time we have. So let me pause here and think. This is from the famous psychologist at Wharton, Adam Grant, took it from LinkedIn. So are you all together? Let us join hands to solve societal problems using AI. This is one quick example I shared, but which one are you? Which one are you when it comes to solving societal problems? Because we cannot say, okay, I can come in and solve it, right? That is very good. That's very optimistic. But just one person can solve it. We all have to come together, right? Because there are 17 goals that are out there, but there are so many problems, like pressing problems out there. So how we can all collectively come together and solve it? It's like, let's take that action, let's take that initiative. And also I wanted to add that we also have that empathy part of it. Okay, I perceive a problem, how do I solve it? How do I contribute to solve it? So that we all come together to solve these societal problems, so that there is no planet B, right? So we make this earth beautiful. And as I conclude, I wanted to emphasize once again, so how we can use fair use of data. So current threats to that wildlife can be at risk wildlife threats can be avoided. And then explain those models so that we can examine any root causes that are there, so we don't end up having any erroneous data, right? Or share certain data that shouldn't be shared, about collecting data for the elephants, and then that ends up in wrong hands, so they go and hurt elephants. So, and also make sure there is accountability, right? And also have transparency. Whatever that we do, we have all these 4 principles. So we approach the in solving the problems, in achieving through AI, so that we can solve for social good. That is all I have. So I'm going to go to the chat window and ask if you have any questions. Thank you all for listening and hearing me out. Any questions the participants have? Thank you. I wanted to see but how we can take the principles what I shared in a paper, and how we can apply that in the in taking in one of the social good projects that Google, many organizations out there are working towards this, and we wanted to make sure how we can apply that. I have 1 more minute. If I can stay. I don't know how long I can stay in here, but happy to take any questions you may have. So think through when I mentioned about Professor Adam Grant. What I wanted to see is, like, we cannot just talk about it and do nothing. We all have to come together to take action, and that's what I meant to say. Like, how are we going to take that action? And that is like, let's walk the talk, and that's what we need to do in order to make sure, because when we think of AI, people, unless we go in detail about AI, every application we take, we as humans also, we are constructive and as well as destructive. And AI is also, it is used for good and as well as for bad, and how we can utilize it for good. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. How far can we push this outside the governments or adverse organizations that block it? As long as we follow these EU standards. Yeah, it's a very broad question, Simone, but what I'm saying is, like, we have to follow the standards and the principles so that we can incorporate in every model that we develop. so that we make it more inclusive, and we make it like for society, how we create that societal impact. And since we're talking about environmental impact, and how we also create that environmental impact. So we cannot ignore governments, because in every nation the government is has different laws. But as you see, that this for the AI, we follow the GDPR laws, EU laws. So we want to make sure we follow those standards and incorporate in our models. And thank you all for joining.